Welcome to the Investor Fuel Real Estate Investing Show, where I interview the nation's top real estate entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and other amazing entrepreneurs to help educate and inspire you to take your business and your life to the next level. My goal is to add tremendous value to you during every single episode of this show. If you get value, I'd love it if you subscribe on your favorite podcast player, subscribe on YouTube, and my very favorite, please share this with your community so we can impact even more entrepreneurs. Let's start today's show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited to talk to Michael McDonald today, an old friend of mine. We're going to be talking about really kind of a story of his struggle over the past few years and a struggle that a lot of you will resonate with. So kind of how to turn lemons into lemonade, how to turn those hard lessons into making you more bulletproof, a better business person, maybe a better overall person, husband, father, all those things when you go through the struggle. So you don't want to go around the struggle because you need some of those lessons. Nobody wants those lessons, but they make you stronger. So excited to share this with you today. Michael, welcome to the show, buddy.
Mike, good to be here, man. Excited to dive in.
Yeah. So, hey, before we jump into this, I know we're going to talk a little bit about your story of the last few years, and it's not that different. I mean, I have a lot of, I know a lot of kind of high level operators, and it's not to take anything away from you, but it's been a trying couple of years. A lot of people have been through the shit, if you will. And the reality is it makes you a better person. Like there's things in my life that have happened to me over the years, whether it's business or personal or whatever, that I thought this was the end. Like, it's like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And then time goes by and you're like, man, that's one of the better things that happened to me because, there's always a silver lining that we never see when it's happening. But I think a lot of people have been through that over the past couple of years, and some have given up and moved on to other businesses and some haven't. And it's important to kind of, learn those lessons along the way. But before we jump into this, I think this going to be a great show today. Tell us a little bit about your backstory and a little bit more about you.
Yeah, 100%, man. So it's definitely perspective is everything, right? And um, going real far back to the beginning, when I learned about wholesale real estate, I attended that workshop. I put the 20,000 on credit that I didn't have, and I found myself sitting at home with my wife after I made this investment, figuring how in the world am I going to make back $20,000 when I'm making $30,000 a year and barely affording my bills at the time. And that was a moment where we could have sat there and said, oh, 6 months go by, I haven't gotten a deal, I'm screwed. This isn't for me, this isn't going to work, right? Or I could have said, hey, this is the attitude of, I've got to be better. I'm going to do this and I'm not going to quit. If I don't quit, I can't fail. And
Yeah.
so I say that to say, in the 7th month after my wife started questioning, is this going to work or not, I landed a $20,000 deal. And I had a sigh of relief to say, wow, this actually works. This wholesale thing that people talk about, you can actually do and make money with. And, after that, I went on to wholesale, 10, 15 properties to a guy who ended up becoming my business partner. And shortly after that, I let him know, I was in Nebraska at the time, and I let him know, hey man, my wife wants to move to Las Vegas. So I know we just started business together, but would that be cool, right? Like, is that something that you'd support? And like looking back, he was like, who is this guy, right? This crazy man. Like, we just started a business, you just quit your job to go full time in real estate, 6 months in, and you want to move to Vegas. You're nuts, right? That's what he was thinking. He didn't tell me that until after the fact, but he supported it. And I moved from Nebraska in 2019. I quit my job, I sold my house, moved across the country and to a place I've never been, and to be closer to her sister, my wife's sister, and couldn't have done it without like my wife's support. We had one baby at the time. We now have three kids, and uh, life is just a lot different, man. Like at that time when we moved here, we had no idea what was going to happen, right? I learned virtual wholesaling. I learned that I can talk to sellers over the phone and I can buy their house. And you know what time it was, right? It was 2019, 2020, 2021. Interest rates were really good. We were shooting fishes in barrels, right? it was hard to lose money in the real estate business at that time. And we had a good run, right? We went on to um, we learned about investor fuel. I can't remember what year it was. I think 2020. We met some really high level people, and we started really leveling up. And we got to the point where we just like my partner and I, and one acquisitions guy, and like one lead manager. And we started hiring like team and stuff. We did $2.2 million in 2021,
Hmm.
and that was starting from scratch with our own dollars, with a $500 a month marketing budget campaign, up to a 55, $60,000 a month budget, and just figuring it all out, right? So like
Yeah.
that was up to the point of before things got a little bit challenging. So I'll kind of stop there, and just in case you have any
Yeah,
questions.
we'll talk about kind of the past couple of years and some of the struggles that people have faced. And, I think when you've been through a tough time, you're more likely to throw yourself into a difficult decision because you get confident at like figuring stuff out. You're like, I don't know what to do, but here's what we're going to do. Right. And you might be wrong, but you
Yeah,
just get confident with making decisions. And so,
I do.
you would probably be more confident now to move across the country again, because you've done it before.
No
But you
brainer.
just kind of know that it like toughen, like all these things toughen you, right? They make you a better entrepreneur. And it doesn't mean that you won't have challenges again. I mean, we tend to operate on the fringe. So we always kind of push the limits on things. Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
like, yeah, I say on one hand, you get better at kind of falling, kind of like pushing yourself into uncertainty. But we also tend to kind of push the limits of like, well, I'm gonna triple or whatever. You just kind of like go way, way too far, probably. I mean, I do.
Same.
Anyway, but these things all make you stronger. I mean, like this, it's like, how do you turn lemons into lemonade? And the reality is the very business we're in is helping people through difficult situations. So we need to be good at solving difficult problems for other people and ourselves, right? Ultimately. So,
Yeah, and to your point, I want to touch on this because I say this is where we were. It was hard, and then we didn't just get there with like a snap of a drop of a pin, right?
right.
Like there were hundreds of sellers helped. There were some really big problems solved. There was scrambling to get the money to buy the house. There was I don't know if we accounted for this expense. Like, where's that money going to come from? Like, there's all of these questions. Or like, ooh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize we had a $25,000 uh, media buyer bill to pay still. Like, there's all these things that these are real challenges that um, we have to think about and
Yeah.
and solve for.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess a little bit about your story over the past couple of years. I know you've been through some struggles, and a lot of people have. I think that it's interesting because I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody. I've got a lot of friends that over the past couple of years that have struggled a lot. People that have crushed it over the past couple of years. It's just that's one of the things, like as a student of the game, it's always blown me away because on some levels that was my story. I came in 2008 and everybody was running away, and I have some friends now that at the time we weren't friends, like we were just kind of new acquaintances that will say like, I thought you were an idiot, but it turns out that they weren't. I mean, he'll say like, well, you weren't, you were a genius. I don't know if I was a genius, probably somewhere in the middle there, but it's all perspective, right? And I've seen people like where I had raging success for a few years, and then I thought, man, things are getting tough. Things are really hard here. This is like 2015 or 2016, and then I see somebody else come out of nowhere and just crush it. I could say some names of people that you would know that it's like they came out of nowhere and just crushed it for a couple of years. Um, and so it's a lot of it is perspective of how hard you're willing to work, how much, shit you're willing to wade through or whatever it might be. Like whatever your demons are, whatever your challenges are, some of it is the market, some of it's interest rates, some of it's macro economy. A lot of it's in between your ears, right? So, not
Most of it's in between
away
your
from the past
ears.
couple of years. A lot of it is, right? And so, but just talk. Can I keep talking about like what you've gone through over the past 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, for sure. So, no, I'll never forget this, right? Like, and I shared with you, I had to kind of Because when you have that successful of a year in the eyes of most people, right? Um, and the reason I say it like that is because social media is fooling, right? Um, Sometimes somebody looks like, if you got this big team, right? When we had a team that was a medium-sized team, and we were all on the same page, and we were all running the same route, if you will. Um, we were just crushing it. We had a dialed in thing. We didn't stray from that. We kept laser focus. It's when we started getting like shiny object syndrome and looking at other things. So for me, it was coaching and a podcast. And hey, we crushed this market. Why don't we go do 5 other markets? It'll be easy, right? And like the reality was that was a distraction because we had to hire more staff. We didn't know the market. Things broke. There was a diminishing return on marketing. And so all while we're growing this team, at one point we got up to 15 employees and our overhead was $150,000 a month. And like we're like, okay, well if we do 2 million like this, well we should be able to do 4, right? Like we'll double. Like that was the logic.
Right.
And I'll never forget like one of my mentors in 2022 I think it was the end of 2022 when the interest rates were already up. He said that the play that you ran to get to this point is not going to be the same play that you run for the next 3 years or the next 4 years during this cycle. And I have chills right now because the partnership that I was in at that time, we weren't clear on our roles and we weren't clear on who was calling the shots and who was making the decisions. And so what that led to was indecision. And it cost us probably $1 million over the next few years. And what I mean by that is we didn't make the changes that our mentor suggested us to make. He said, you're gonna have to make some hard decisions. What does that mean? You're gonna have to, you don't need an underwriter. Who are you? You know what I mean? Like you're running a small business. You don't need an underwriter. You need all these people.
Yeah.
Get lean, fire them, and we just held on. We said, we'll get through it. But getting through 3 years of high interest rate environment wasn't just like a easy thing to do. So what ended up happening is our 2.5 million or 2 point whatever million of revenue the previous year ended up becoming 1 million the next year of rev. So we lost half of our profit or a rev, and our overhead was the same. So we
Mm.
lost the variance of all of the payroll, right?
Right.
And so that was painful. And at the end of that year, um, I got help. I started getting totally burnt out because you imagine this. You're shooting fish in a barrel, you're helping a lot of people, you're making a lot of money, and you're working like half part-time, right? Traveling, having fun, living life, not really, it's not even that hard, right? But when it is hard, but you're not making money and it feels like a grind every single day and you're not making any money and it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, you start to look inward. And I think that's what's important is I did, and thank God I did because I had to figure out who I was, right? And why did I create this situation? This was my fault. And what attracted me to this situation? And why am I here? And what is this all for? Right? Like these are some very deep questions, right, that I had to ask myself. And ultimately, what it led me to realizing is I stuck a band-aid um, on the problem, and I decided that it it didn't make sense to continue on with my business partner at the time, and so we decided to part ways, right? And um, hired an operator, made some changes in the business and let go of some people that, were kind of like nice to have staff at the time and just got focused. We'll look back at what was working when we got to that point and eliminated all distractions. And it forced us to get better. And like I said, I think there's no pain, no gain, right? You've heard that. but I think you have to find some love for the pain. And obviously losing on our like we lost like a few hundred grand, right? And we wouldn't have been able to even survive that like 2 years in a row. We wouldn't have been able to survive that had we not made some good decisions leading up to that point, like buying some rental properties, having
Mhm.
lines of credit, having some liquidity, right? And so that helped us really survive that challenging time. But as I reflect back on it, the last 2 years when I was in the midst of that, I felt like you said, you feel like you're dying. Like you feel like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this situation. And um, now that I can see the light, right? And like this year is just a ups, like we flipped that bad year on its head, and we're on pace to probably double, if not 2.5 times that. And I look at those times, and my wife, I share with her what's going on, but like I don't give her all the details. You know what I mean? And she was like, now that I've shared with her, now that we've kind of made it through that, she's like, how did you deal with all of that? How did you manage to get through that? And our life just continued to go on like everything was just fine. Like we still got to go on vacation. Like we made the best memories. You know, we did a lot of things that were just very joyful and um, memorable during that time period when we could look at it and say that was the worst 2 years of my life. But
Yeah.
I look at it and I say those were the best 2 years of my life because I learned so much from them, and I'm a way better investor. I'm a way better husband. I'm a way better dad. I'm more present, right? There's just a lot of things that I learned through those challenging times where I look back and I say I grew a lot.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. So one of the things that a lot of people do is they move to the sidelines, and I'm not here to knock any of those people, but what I can tell
Yeah,
you is when you face that adversity and you go through it instead of around it, um, it you can't quite equate the benefits that that'll have over time. But when the market, because it is a cyclical market, right? There's going to be another cycle. There's going to be another easy time. But what happens is the people that get in on the cycle the earliest and stay the latest tend to do. Now, if you overstay, you're welcome. What happens for most people is most people won't get off the sidelines until the market is kind of hot again, but they missed out on an opportunity. And then on the tail end, they'll be nervous that something bad is going to happen probably way sooner than it does, and they just pull back out because they're just timid. But after you've been through it, you're willing to face it, right? And so what happens is the next time there are cycles, which there will be, you can plow right through it and never pull back because you've essentially, your skin is tougher than it was, right? And you just know,
yeah,
I'm not going to pull out. Like, you never stop, but you pull different tools out of your tool belt to kind of weather that storm. And you just, and a lot of times it's different exit strategies. It's buying a little more conservatively, whatever it might be. But you just kind of use the plays that you've been through before because you've been through it before and you know what not to do.
100%. And that is what happened is we had to call different plays, and because the wholesale market, it got squeezed a little bit, right? And so it was either we bought houses and we bought deals to keep going, or we were going to be left with the bag essentially.
Yeah.
And so this year what's been a huge game changer for us is we've taken a lot of risk off the table by buying less deals. And even though we've closed out 100 deals already this year, I say we're buying less, but we're wholesaling almost everything,
Hmm.
right? And that's been really good for our cash flow for the business, and it's allowed me to really slow down the amount of activity that goes on in your brain, the amount of thinking that happens when you're managing 25 flips, right, at a time, and really just like dial in the business, like really dial things in again
Yeah.
and cherry pick. And so I started a brand where we're holding more properties, and it's really specific to I would say more so the Hispanic community, but primarily because they can't get regular financing. So we're offering financing for those folks,
Yeah.
and that's been awesome to watch my my spreadsheet of how much income could I make to get rich before has moved over to a spreadsheet of how much cash flow can I create and how much net worth can I build from just being smarter about buying these investments. And so that's what I'm up to right now.
I mean, that's part of the lesson, right? Is like to be less transactional and buy assets that are either rentals or owner finance, or I think you're doing rent to own type stuff, like assets that are going to pay you over a long period of time, which that was one of my early lessons too. Like everybody looks back and wishes that they had kept more of the deals that they had done as rentals, but, and I do as well. But there was a point where I'm like, because when you're keeping rentals or when you're doing a long-term strategy like that, you generally are sacrificing some revenue today, right? You're like, well, I could wholesale this or I could fix and flip this and make 20, $30,000, but I'm just going to keep it and, you know, pass that keep that equity for now and harvest it down the road. Right. So, it's a hard decision then. In hindsight, I wish I had done more of them, but, of course everybody does, but it makes your business stronger too, because now you've got essentially another stream of income, or it could be an insurance policy, like something that you could sell off if you really needed to. Where if you're just very transactional, you don't have that to lean on.
100%. I think it's just like the reason why, people go to Mastermind is to get around smarter people, and learn from things that the mistakes that they didn't have to learn essentially. Or if you're, if you have too shiny of object, it can be a problem too, right? So you gotta, for me, it's keeping the blinders on and just doing what I know is going to get me closer to what I ultimately want, which financial freedom is the goal, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're up to. And I would say, kind of reflecting back too on the journey, why I think it's so important to who you're listening to, who you're talking to, is because there's always going to be news, right? Um, you don't have to listen to it though. So what I mean is the interest rates are high, the sky is falling, right? Like that's been the news for a while, but the people who are crushing it right now, they don't, that doesn't mean anything. That's somebody else's economy. Um,
You can
I
make
want to
your own
pay attention to
economy. That's
my,
right. Yeah.
yeah, I want to pay attention to my economy.
Yeah.
What's in between my ears and what I'm feeding my brain every day, right? And so I would just challenge like anybody. Like obviously I went through a tough time. I do not accept um I don't accept that it happening again, right? Thankfully, every investor was paid back. I was able to pay my bills, like, and nothing deathly happened. It felt like it was going to be really hard, but my point is what you focus on you're gonna get there. You're gonna get closer if you focus on what more of you want. So
Yeah.
stop focusing on the things that you don't want and that don't serve you.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I want to make sure we don't run out of time, but a couple other things that we talked about up front is, what happens is a lot of people, again, not to knock anybody here, but in a tough market, they just sometimes, if they had a bigger team, they're like, go down to essentially being a solo entrepreneur, just doing everything themselves. I'm going to get so lean that it's me doing everything. And you didn't do that. And I think that's, everybody has their own goals, but nobody's goal is to work more, like want to work harder than ever before. Right. And so I think it's easy to get in the process of getting lean and kind of making this work to just rely on just you. But I know, I'm sure you leaned out and you talked about that a bit. But I think the important thing is when you go through a market like this is to keep a core team around you, because you don't want to be self-employed. You want to be a business owner that you have some, flexibility with your time. Like you said, if you had gone down to just you and you talked about over the past couple of years, you were able to still spend time with your kids, take some little vacations, do some things like that. If you were doing everything, it's a lot harder to do that. And that's not really the life that you got into this for in the first place.
I'm so happy you said that. And, you know, what it also does is for the ones who stuck around when, like, I'll be honest, like, we didn't know if it was gonna work out. Like, it was to the point where I don't know. Like, I have faith and I'm not gonna quit, but just because I don't quit doesn't mean that I'm a machine that can somehow pull off a miracle, right? And the reason I say that is because, I have incredible people around me. I have an operator who rode out this storm essentially, who's an absolute stud, and we're working on a project together that I think is going to make buying houses look like a kindergarten thing. And because it's going to be so exponential, and I can't share anything about it yet because it's um, too early. But I will say that the team that stuck around, it just goes to show you how much they believe in the mission, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the impact that we can make, the amount of sellers that we've helped. We've helped 100 people, sellers. That doesn't account for all the contractors, all the title companies, all the lenders that have, there's just so many people, and so not to mention the here's the biggest thing, right? The freedom. Like, I'm taking my family to Disney in 2 weeks, and I asked my team before I left, like, hey guys, what would need to happen over the next 2 weeks for me to, go away for 30 days, right? And things to not fall apart, right? Because it would be easy for me to sit here and say that everything would run perfectly, we'd, come back with more money, but like that's just not quite the reality. The reality is they said, well, we pretty much have everything, going except for maybe the marketing. I'm like, hey, I've got good news. The marketing is now automated. So, um, that's why we do it though, right? Is so we can have that
Right.
ability to do it. Now, does somebody who has these big of goals always probably take enough time for themselves or to take a sabbatical? I've never done it. A week, I think, in Hawaii at the beginning of this year was probably the longest that I've done. But I think we should. You know what I mean? I think we build these things, we go through these things to have the freedom, so we should take more advantage of the fruits of that labor.
Yeah. I know a few of the things that you did too is just get laser focused on the one thing, right? I mean, I know you and I have talked a lot over the years, and you've done coaching, you started a podcast, you've done a lot of things. You started to operate in multiple markets, and you really kind of just got super focused on one market. You know, no coaching, stop the podcast, things like that that just can go all in on the one thing. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look back at what got me to this, what got me to what I considered the first pinnacle for me was cash flow was good, the finances were like extremely dialed, and when that consistent cash flow went away, I had to reflect and ask myself, what happened? Why, right? And it was a lot of the things that we've talked about already, but I would say most importantly, it was the wholesale. It was we I learned how to get really good at creating a marketing machine, finding good deals, sales to close those deals, and then a good selling process to be able to sell them to investors to make the most, to extract the most amount of profit out of them. So I just said, hey, this year we're going to focus almost entirely on wholesale. The wholesale needs to be able to sustain the business. If we take down a flip, it's going to be really profitable, and we're going to be very selective on those because I have a guy who's able to manage that, and we have contractors who are good. So, with that being said, it was just laser focus on. Um, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our income is based off of the wholesale, and that's the shift.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
I think it's
focus.
important to have like a stable foundation. I mean, I do coaching, I do a lot of other things, but when I look back now, like, you really have to have a base of what you do that pays all your bills. And then I hate to use the analogy of like casino, but you're kind of playing with the house's money. Like you've got
Yeah.
a part of your business that you can take some risks, try some things. It could be even in your core business, trying new marketing channels, right? But you've got this base that just works and you know it, and then dabble with the other things. And then honestly, a lot of the things that you dabble with are not going to work out. Um, some are, some might. And so then if it takes hold, then you can like lean into that and figure out how to kind of grow that. But the mothership, has to be stable before you go do a bunch of other things.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true for sure.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thanks for sharing your story with us. If folks want to connect with you, uh, one way or another, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Instagram. That'd be awesome. I post most of, what I'm up to on there. It's Michael McDonald REI.
Okay. We'll add a link down below. So thanks again for sharing your story today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's
Yep.
good to catch up, man. Love to
Yeah.
hear what you're up to. So,
Yeah, always. So guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're going through the struggle, just know, don't try to go around it. Just go through it. At the end of the day, it's harder. It's going to feel painful at the time. Someday you're going to be glad you did it, because if you went around it, you're going to have regrets. If you go through it, you're going to have some regrets too, but you're going to have the pride of knowing that you faced adversity head on, went through it, and are stronger because of it. So hope you guys enjoyed today's show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us for today's show. You can learn more about the amazing benefits of the Investor Fuel Mastermind community, including surrounding yourself with hundreds of other rock stars, 100% financing on your deals, and members-only discounts from vendors you're likely already using that, as a member of Investor Fuel, will save you more than the cost of your membership. Visit investorfuel.com to learn more. You can also check out the show's notes for access to free resources, how to get access to world-class lead generation, and even how to work with me directly one-on-one. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you on the next show.